Hi, let's start the chapter. Okay. Okay, so in this chapter, we'll talk about decision making. It's part of the management function. This is chapter 4. So, in the decision making, the steps of any decision is this: if you start with something called unaware, then you became aware, and then you became alert, and then you do a responding. So the steps in the decision making is these 4 steps in general. And you should be having a situational awareness. Is like if you see in the picture, there's a shark behind the people. They're not aware there is a shark behind them. Yeah, it's important to be aware. Now, the decision making models could be a rational model, which is the decision makers act rationally. However, most of decisions do not fit the assumption of perfect rational. So that's something you probably need to take into consideration, that most of the decisions do not fit the assumption. Decision makers can be influenced by cultural, internal, external politics, and escalation of commitment. Uh, Probably I'll bring you an example of why it was illegal to pay for the client's alcohol, among other factors. Decision makers routinely it's good enough, always goes on, saying do some decision based on it keeps the situation good enough and under control. Bounded rationalities. Manager make rational decision, but are limited or bounded by their ability to process information. And that's why we make decision according to the information that we have in our hand. And tools like DSS and ESS, will be talking about it in the class, are helping to make kind of a bounded, helping to make these kind of a decisions for managers and also line managers. And then you have what you call intuition. And there is a lot of decision comes from the intuition also. Steps in decision-making process. The decision-making process is involved in the 8 steps. And the first steps start with identifying a problem. Identifying a problem or opportunity. Identify decision criteria. So what things will help you to make these decisions? Assign weight to criteria. Develop alternatives. Analyze alternatives. Select an alternative. Implement the alternative, and evaluate decision effectiveness. But before we do that, we need to speak about calculating if it's a problem. We need to calculate and how to mitigate the risk. Calculate the percentage of risk and calculate the effect of that risk. And we can bring a lot of examples that represent how we make a decision to solve the issue. But if you look at the process, it's a good example, so probably you can understand from here what do we mean. Now, in this, what we see, as we said, identify problem, identify criteria, allocate weight to criterias, develop alternatives, analyze alternatives, select an alternative, implement the alternative, and evaluate decision effectiveness. And you can keep doing this circle, and you might be, once you're realizing that your alternative that you selected is wrong, you might start from here too. So let's give an example. For example, my sales representatives need tablets. And we had same situation where when we implemented a mobile application, yes, it's called mobile app, educational mobile. We gave the students tablets, but our decision was that the solution should be in the tablet, not on the tablet, part of the tablet, not outside the tablet. And we will analyze why we made such a decision. But in here, in the case, for example, we look at my sales representative need a new tablet. That's identify a problem and identify the decision criteria. So what makes us to make a decision criteria? And here, what we're looking at, what kind of operating system, the connectivities, the software and the application, the size and the weight, and display quality. And what I wanted to add here of probably aftermath support and service. Once, then we allocate the weight of criteria. What's the most important, what's the least important, and how we add them together. So operating system, we give them 10. Connectivity 8, software and application say 6, size and weight is 4, and display quality is 3. You add them together and then you cross-check them with the developed alternative, which is, does Apple iPad Air, how much you can give it out of 10 for operating system, for example. So the developed alternative, which is this one, would be these alternative that have Apple iPad Air, Samsung Galaxies, LG G Pad, Google Nexus, iPad Mini, Microsoft Surface, HP Touchpad, Kindle Fire, and no names probably also gonna work. And then you analyze alternative with these criteria's numbers and how much they meet each one of them. Once we analyze it and we find out that the highest score goes to Apple iPad Air, for example, you select the alternative, which is Apple iPad Air over these, and justify your selection through the allocate the weight of it. Now, there's might be saying disagreeing with you, but once you allocate the weight, then they will probably understand how you selected that alternative. Then you start implementing what? The Apple iPad Air. Once you did, you need to evaluate your decision. If it's a good, you continue. If not, you start identify it again and again. Now, as we said, intuition can really take a big part of the decisions and how intuition can affect your decision. But what's an intuition? Intuition can be driven from Say, in this case, a manager makes a decision, initiated decision. It's called affected initiated decision. And that's coming from the manager makes the decision based on the feeling or emotion. So his decision is affected based on feeling and emotion, and that's drive his intuition. The other base is kind of a cognitive based decision, which is we try to show that, but most of the time we might be feeling not very well to present that it's an affected initial decision, and we want to make it as a cognitive based decision, and that is based on the manager make decision based on skills, knowledge, and training, and that can driven the intuition. And mostly the apps like a DSS and ESS is will be helping you the cognitive based decision managers. And then there is an intuition that's driven from subconscious mental processing. The issues like subconscious probably has not been 100% approved, but let's assume it's true, is there subconscious mental processing. And manager use data from the subconscious mind to help them make the decision. And that's creating influence the intuition. And the last is value or ethic based decision, which is manager make the decision based on ethical values or cultural. So the question, what does your gut tell you, or intuition in a way? Now, there is different types of problem and decisions. Mostly what we're trying to deal with is actually a structured problem. But we also have what you call unstructured problem. And we're trying to, even when we face unstructured problem, we try to make it a structure. But the challenge is really not in the structured problem and a clear definition. The challenge is in the unstructured problem. But what's the difference between them? The structured problems usually, to solve it, there is some kind of a programmed decisions. And a structured problem is a straightforward, familiar, and easy defined resolve using a programmed decision. That's for the guys who like sport. Um, they say like he threw a curveball on me. That's unstructured for the header, for example. So if it's the problem is straightforward, familiar, easily defined, then resolve using a programmed decision, which is the programmed decision. It will be a repetitive, structures, problem solve with a routine approach. Managers make programmed decision by falling back on the procedures, rules, and policies. Then you have what you call unstructured problems, which could be new and unusual. Information is often ambiguous or incomplete, resolved using the unprogrammed decisions, and it's usually a unique and recruiting and requires a custom-made solution. These are the challenged one, and this is what it says out-of-box thinking, driven from out-of-box thinking or a creative problem solving. These are the standard one, which is they have a certain approach to it. Now, there is other thing that affect the decision making is a disadvantage and the disadvantage in the we have an individual decision making and we have a group decision making. And what's the advantage and the disadvantage of a group decision making? The advantage of the group decision making usually generates more complete information and knowledge, generates more diverse alternatives, different solution. It becomes more legitimate because everybody is made that decision, and it will increases the acceptance of a solution. And I'll bring you back to the thinking where you divide um, subjective from objectives, and the objective where you put everybody involved to make that decision, which is increase the acceptance of your solutions for an IT problem. Now, then you have the disadvantage of group decision making, and usually that's probably it's a time consuming, minority may dominate, ambiguity, responsibilities, and pressures to confirm. And I think when it comes to the time consuming, you compare to the type of the decision you need to make. If you are going to spend $5 to $10 million on implementing an IT solution that you will be utilizing for the next 10 years or something like that, then time consumption consuming is less sensitive than if you are thinking of something that you're going to cost you very less time and effort, and when you implement it you can have a very flexibility of changing it. So what's a group think? A group think is a pressure for conformity, often deter individual from critically appraising unusual, minority, or unpopular. An individual's mental efficiency, reality testing, and more judgment deteriorates. So the whole group will come up with an idea, and that doesn't have to be a good decision. And we put the pressures on the rest of the team to follow it because the group thinking will affect the individual thinking anyway. Now, there is biases and errors in the decision making. Now, we do use biases in everything. We try to be unbiased or say that, but actually lots of our decision is kind of driven by some biases. Now, in the biases, common decision making biases and errors is basically we can see in overconfidence. People are overconfident and make the bias or errors. Selective perceptions. So they see all the side, but they select some of the side who can support them in their bias decision. Confirmation. So there is some kind of a confirmation, a pressure, peer pressure, superior pressure, confer to select certain solution. And then you have what you call sunk cost, and that's a lots of companies utilize sunk cost. You do an initial investment, and then it's very difficult for you to back up from that investment. So you keep adding more solution, IT solution or whatever, to have already you had an initial heavy investment there. Um, Once you selected DB2 over SQL, in halfway you realize it's it's not the right database. It's pretty difficult for you to back up from it because you already have a few apps that running on DB2 and cannot be run on SQL or any other app, any database else. So you already invested in DB2. It's a sunk cost. It's done for the next 5 years. You kind of look and start looking for apps that runs on DB2. Escalation of commitment. Sometimes you overcommitting, you escalate the commitment, and there is what you call self-serving. Sometimes you make a decision because of self-serving. So you say, I cannot use anything less than the first tier apps, such as selecting SAP, for example. Do you need it? No, but my added it's not self-serving if I am gonna purchase a Sage and utilize a Sage, for example. And then hindsight, which is that's too late to or too late to realize that the decision in your hand, or too late to make that decision. So you're already committed and you just driven in that road. Have you experienced any of these? We reached to the end of it. We will talk about the assignments. It's online activity tools, which is a cognitive based and decision making, and exercise two, which is also a discussion area in the learn. Thank you.